Welcome everybody to the first PSF. We're getting started pretty roughly. What we're trying to do, real broad strokes, is copy the the way that Protocol Labs and the Node.js Foundation do their meetings. And so we're kind of at the moment we're kind of aping them unsuccessfully. So still got to get some skills down with the Zoom meeting moderation. And so we'll work on that for the meeting next time. This The intention of this meeting is really just to lay down the broad strokes, to introduce the Permissionless Software Foundation to people who might be a little unfamiliar with it. We had it's this whole thing is one giant software experiment, and we're trying to uh, you know, make it less. So far, it's been a very small project, and what I want to do is bring more people into the project. And so let's start real quick by reviewing the. Okay, the mission of the Permissionless Software Foundation is to make it easy for individuals to protect their privacy, circumvent censorship, and engage in economic activity. And so the focus here is on individual rights and empowerment, and it's less so on the technology. Uh, the focus in terms of technology so far has been on Bitcoin Cash and and like IPFS and other technologies, but I want to keep the focus with the mission on protecting individual rights of free speech and privacy. That's the main focus, and then we do that by creating software that uses new technology. Um, so one of the first things that we need to do is to nail down our communication channels and to create a safe space for people to communicate. And so that's why the code of conduct and the moderation policy is at the top of the agenda. So I really encourage people to review them. They're pretty straightforward. These were actually just copied and pasted from the Node.js Foundation. So they've had years to sort of simplify and perfect these, but it's the pretty standard boilerplate stuff. Be respectful, no trolling, no, don't make people uncomfortable with sexualized language or imagery, no harassment. And so that's the and then there's an enforcement. There's like the warning, temporary bans, and then permanent bans. And so I think it's really important that whoever emerges to be considered a leader in this space, which anybody can, that we all agree on a code of conduct and a moderation policy, and we stick to it, because this toxicity in the blockchain space is sort of infamous. And I think that that's what stopped a lot of forward progress. Like, this technology has existed for 10 or 12 years to protect human rights and to circumvent uh, state actors that would like to censor people. But there has been a lack of traction due to just the toxicity in the space. I think we're all veterans here, and we've all observed that this space is full of, two steps forward, one step back, and that's one of the changes that I'd like to affect with the Permissionless Software Foundation. Um, so before I move on, does anybody have any input on the code of conduct or the moderation policy?
Not really. It all looks pretty standard to me.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that's the idea. That's the idea, is for it to be fairly standardized. So big picture. Let's move on to the big picture. So I reviewed the PSF mission, and I think anybody who spent time in the chat rooms has gotten a sense of the PSF sort of culture so far, which is pretty nascent. What I want to also do in this meeting is briefly review the token economics, because this is one of the unique things about the PSF is the token. And really what we're trying to solve with the PSF is a few different problems. Like, One is that there is this problem of reliable funding in open source. And this is a general problem. So it encompasses the Bitcoin space and the whole cryptocurrency space, but it's actually much bigger than that, the open source thing. And the Heartbleed bug is the poster child for this, where a few years ago, for people who don't remember, there was a bug discovered in the SSL encryption that is used by every bank that has a website. And it affected every website that used SSL encryption, which is basically every website. Turns out, like, there was one guy that was employed part-time to maintain this software, which was used by every website in the world. And it was just due to a lack of funding. And sorry, just checking the chat on YouTube. And so this is what really awakened people to this idea that funding if our infrastructure, our day-to-day infrastructure relies on open source software, and this lack of funding is a real problem for the infrastructure that we rely upon. So what the token is trying to do is solve that problem. And the way it solves that problem is it's based on the Bancor white paper. And let me just go to the PS Foundation website to illustrate this. So the idea is there's this app, this token liquidity app, and it's what pegs the token to Bitcoin Cash. And it maintains perfect liquidity. So the exchange rate's free to fluctuate. It can go from, anywhere from 0 to infinity, essentially. And but it's what ensures that our token is always pegged to Bitcoin Cash. It's always backed by Bitcoin Cash at some level. The amount changes, but that peg is there, and people can move in and out of the token. And that's essentially, according to Bancor, their thesis was that's the difference between play money and real money, is liquidity, if you can maintain perfect liquidity. And so that's the basis idea of our token. And so then once you kind of understand that this token and the liquidity is what makes it real and keeps it pegged to the underlying asset, which is Bitcoin Cash, then it becomes a supply and demand. You just have to wrap your head around the idea of supply and demand. And so there's two ways for us to increase demand of the token. One is by holding tokens, which people who have gained access to the VIP room have staked tokens and are holding them. So that creates demand. The other way of creating demand is through burning tokens. And so that's what these illustrations on the webpage talk about, is the vending machines and the consulting, which are two ways that tokens get burned. And these are all going back to that way of funding open source development. So we build things like wallet.fullstack.cash or fullstack.cash, which is a subscription service. And through use of that software, it burns the tokens. And so the developers who get rewarded in the tokens for the open source work they do to maintain that infrastructure, that's how they ultimately get paid. So that's the broad strokes of the token economics. So however we as a community grow this thing, it's important that there are these sort of economic rules that we have to follow in terms of supply and demand. We need to always be aware that, like, we can't just spend these tokens, as much as we want, which should hopefully be towards open source software in the service of protecting free speech and censorship resistance. And but we can't just spend them however we want. We need to be aware of how do we increase demand. And so my thoughts up to this point has been, the fullstack.cash service, which is a service for developers to build blockchain-centric apps. Things like wallet.fullstack.cash that let you, use cryptocurrency, and like you pay a tiny fraction on each transaction that goes to burn tokens, or message.fullstack.cash, which lets you send end-to-end encrypted messages and do all sorts of some of the other things, like staking your tokens and signing a signature. But all these usage of the apps burn tokens, so that increases demand. And so what I would like to do is get more ideas like that. Like I would like the Permissionless Software Foundation, in particular, this community committee, to focus on ways that we can grow usage of the token, while staying focused on the mission of the Permissionless Software Foundation. So that's the token economics. Discuss the scope and direction of the community committee with respect to. So that's kind of what I just described. Discuss infrastructure challenges facing adoption of Bitcoin-based technology. So, and Don, I want to get your input on some of this too from the Avalanche side of things, because there's a lot of parallel paths. I'm speaking from my own personal experience, which is the Bitcoin Cash. But in terms of infrastructure, on the Bitcoin Cash side of things, there's probably the best way to visualize it in terms of infrastructure is the cache stack at fullstack.cash, where this is a framework that I developed to go from a full node to a mobile app, and all the layers of infrastructure in between. And this is, when I talk about infrastructure, this is the infrastructure that needs to be maintained. It doesn't need to be these specific blocks, but this general concept of, at the top is people using apps on their phone, and people using, get like Juan Bennett likes to say, is giving people superpowers with software. Of sorry, I'm just trying to find my, there we go, agenda. Of giving them software, giving them superpowers through software that lets them enforce their rights to free speech and economic action. And so in the Bitcoin world, in the Bitcoin Cash world, this comes down to like indexers, like the SLP token indexer, that needs ongoing maintenance, and some of the other software like the BCH.js JavaScript library, the BCH API, REST API, and the core front-end web wallet engine that powers wallet.fullstack.cash. Those are some of the pieces of infrastructure that I would like the Permissionless Software Foundation to maintain as tools to further its mission. And then, like, looking at Avalanche, the infrastructure requirements are much smaller and more nimble with that technology. But I know that Avalanche right now is focused on adoption. There's a lot of similar goals and similar technology, and that it's UTXO based. So real quick, Don, if you have any input on like the sort of infrastructure needs that Avalanche is facing right now, I'd love to hear it.
To be completely honest, I'm not like a developer, so I'm not as knowledgeable on these things. But as far as infrastructure requirements, everything is maintained right now. As far as I know, there's not anything like that needs to be maintained community-wise. Probably a question that I'll have to take a look at, find out some information, and maybe talk about at the next community meeting.
Yeah, great. That's great. So, okay, well, so that basically concludes that big picture discussion that I wanted to have. And I'd love to open this up to more of a roundtable. Unfortunately, we lost David, but we've got Don and we've got Daniel. And really, this is a discussion that we'll take offline to the chat rooms, in particular the VIP chat room. But kind of just over the next couple weeks, I'd love to hear more from more people about like what are the outcomes they'd like to see, and how can the PSF achieve those outcomes? How do we attract more people to the PSF? And so all of this, again, just to keep the scope focused, is on privacy and censorship resistance and economic action. Like those are the ultimate end goals that the Permissionless Software Foundation is focused on. And then how do we achieve those goals with technology? How do we fund the development and maintenance of those goals? This is like the broad strokes and the general focus. And then, like some of the infrastructure I pointed out immediately, some that fullstack.cash uses, and I know that a lot of companies in the Bitcoin Cash space use, and the BCHA space use, like SLP tokens. I think SLP tokens, I'm going to bring this up frequently because it's a very simple protocol that allows tokens, and it works equally well on Avalanche, Bitcoin Cash, BCHA, and even BSV. All four of these chains can support that token protocol, which would make it possible to have cross-chain asset transfers. One SLP token could theoretically be transferred across chains, and I think that would be a boon to people's ability to do economic activity. And I think all those chains, or at least most of them, have uh, a reason to uh, have some skin in the game there, and so that's one of the first work groups I'm hoping to spin off with the technical steering committee, which will probably have the first meeting next week, and I'm trying to recruit developers in the space to join. So um, yeah,
Yeah,
but go ahead.
sorry. That's one of the things that I'm interested a lot is to create those bridges between chains. The cross-chain communication will, I think it will be great, yeah, and will bring a lot of people to the community, to the foundation.
Yeah.
New people.
Yeah, it would be great to bring in developers. I would like to create a more chain agnostic like tech stack, so that I see that as like one of the best ways to grow and bring developers into the space, into all chains, which would help everyone. So, yeah, thanks, Daniel. So does Don, Daniel, do you guys have any ideas as to like just low hanging fruit? Like what would be a good way to bring more people into the space and to expand the discussion?
I think I'd not to add anything new, but just kind of agree with both of y'all just about being chain agnostic and then, carrying on this technology to other chains. Because, at Avalanche, that's like our main selling point really is like going to other chains, kind of like spreading adoption of different technologies. So I think that's really the best way, and it really allows value to just kind of transfer over more fluidly than this kind of chain hopping that we have or that we're seeing all the time. So I think that's really the best low hanging fruit. And it would be fantastic to see just like a unified way of taking SLP tokens from one chain to another, especially like in this fork culture that we have, just kind of making that easier for everyone.
Yes. I think that it would be really helpful. Also, something that we were working or researching in past few months is Filecoin. So that will be more on the side of the privacy and the tools we're using. I would like to retake that research and keep that implementation for us maybe.
Yeah, that would be a really good work group. And thanks for bringing that up, Daniel. Yeah, so Daniel and I have worked on at message.fullstack.cache has a very simple interface for uploading files that are hosted on IPFS, and you pay for that hosting in Bitcoin Cash. So that's one example of sort of using this like sort of cross-chain interaction. And now with Filecoin on the launch, yeah, I think Daniel and I have both looked into Textiles tools, and that seems to be a good way for us to get data not just on IPFS but on Filecoin. And yeah, that's a good point, Daniel. We should that might be another work group that we'd want to spin out of the technical steering committee is something to focus on data storage in general, but obviously Filecoin and IPFS are some
Yes.
some low hanging fruit that we have there for that area. Okay. Well, cool. We can go ahead and keep this meeting fairly short. This was really the main point was just to kick this off and have the first meeting, and then we'll iterate from here. The attendees, we'll do a better job next time of filtering attendees and getting things worked out ahead of time before we live stream. I want to remind everyone that these Bitcoin Cash addresses that are listed here, these are, if you go to message.fullstack.cash, you can send a private end-to-end encrypted message, essentially like an email, to these Bitcoin Cash addresses. And so message.fullstack.cash is how you do it. It's got a feature in there that lets you send a message to any Bitcoin Cash address. And so in Daniel's case and in my case, they're linked to our memo.cash profiles, social media profiles. And so you can interact with us that way. And this is one of the things too is, dog fooding is as we grow the Permissionless Software Foundation, I want us to start using our tools and expanding our tools, which includes, memo.cache for uncensorable social media, the end-to-end encrypted message sharing feature, and other sort of really working on our communication tools and eating our own dog food, so to speak, because I think if it works for us internally, then it's much easier for us to pitch it to other people and grow the usage. So yeah, I encourage everybody and anybody to send me a private message at that Bitcoin Cash address.
So I'm PC Masterclass. Wowzers. Should I have the same handle everywhere, or what do you think?
It's up to you. It's certainly easier to have the same handle. But yeah, it's really up to you. I want to respect people's level of anonymity that they want to achieve, and these tools should also support that. It's definitely easier for people to track you if you go by the same name in different channels.
Yeah, because I'm your lie stops here on Reddit.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, so the choice is really up to you.
Well, I'll message you with your Bitcoin Cash address, my Bitcoin Cash address. That way, it can be added to the page.
Nice. That would be great. Okay, well, let's continue this discussion in the Telegram channel, and in particular the VIP channel, if you guys have access to that. And if anybody needs help getting access to the VIP channel, like verifying your Bitcoin Cash address with the bot, let me know. Yeah, this has been a, we got off to a rocky start, but it's been a good meeting. I'm going to same time we will do the technical steering committee next week at the same time, and so we'll alternate. So the community committee will be bi-weekly and the technical steering committee will be bi-weekly, but it'll be the same day, same time. It'll just alternate. Right on. All right, well, thanks guys.
Very nice.
Appreciate you making the meeting.
All right, thanks. See you.